April 16th, 1945. A nameless crossroads outside Halberstadt, Germany. The fog clings to the rubble like a burial shroud. Willi Herold crouches behind what was once the corner of a bakery, now just a jagged tooth of brick and mortar jutting from the cratered earth. His hands shake as he loads the last belt into his MG42, the metal cold against fingers that haven't stopped trembling since yesterday morning. 17 years old, 4 months of training, 2 days alone at this crossroads. The morning air tastes of cordite and wet ash. Somewhere in the gray soup of dawn, American engines rumble, a sound like distant thunder that never quite arrives, never quite fades. Willi knows that sound now, intimately. The way you know your own heartbeat when fear makes it the loudest thing in the world. His uniform hangs loose on a frame that hasn't finished growing. The helmet, too large, padded with newspaper, sits crooked on his head. In his breast pocket, a letter from his mother, still unread. He'd been saving it. For what, he can't remember now. 48 hours ago, there had been others. Sergeant Kuhn, who'd fought at Kursk. Hans and Friedrich, twins from Bavaria who finished each other's sentences. Old man Weber, who'd survived Stalingrad and shouldn't have been here at all. They'd been tasked with holding this crossroads, where two roads met in a shattered village square, for 6 hours. Just 6. Long enough for the remnants of their division to retreat east, to regroup, to buy time for what everyone knew was already lost. That was before the Jabos came. Willi had been 50 meters away, checking the northern approach, when he'd heard the scream of the American fighter bombers. He'd thrown himself into a crater as the world became fire and shrieking metal. When the dust settled and his ears stopped ringing, the crossroads was silent, except for the crackling of flames. He'd found Kuhn first, or what was left of him. The sergeant's hand still gripped his rifle, fingers locked in death's final clutch. The twins were buried under what had been the church wall. Weber he never found at all. Just his helmet, punctured clean through. And then Willi was alone. He should have run. Every instinct in his teenage body screamed at him to abandon this pointless pile of stones, to flee east like everyone else with sense had already done. But Sergeant Kuhn's last words had been about duty, about buying time, about how every hour they held was another hour for the wounded to evacuate, for the civilians to get further from the front. So Willi stayed. He'd spent that first afternoon alone fortifying his position with the frantic energy of pure terror. He dragged bodies, his friends, into positions that might look like living soldiers from a distance. He rigged tripwires from telegraph cable. He moved the MG42 between 3 different firing positions, making it seem like multiple weapons. He scattered empty ammunition boxes and helmets around the ruins to suggest a larger force. When the Americans came that evening, probing the crossroads with a scout patrol, Willi had opened fire from the bakery ruins. Short, disciplined bursts, just like Kuhn had taught him. Then he'd scrambled through his prepared route, through the cellar, up through the collapsed floor of the house next door, and fired again from a different position. The Americans had pulled back, reporting heavy resistance. That night, Willi didn't sleep. He couldn't. Every shadow was an enemy. Every sound was death approaching. He talked to the corpses for company, apologizing when he had to reposition them, thanking them for staying with him. His mind, seeking any anchor against the solitude, began to fracture at the edges. Now it's dawn of the second day, and the Americans are coming again. He can hear them out there in the fog, voices calling to each other in that strange, harsh language. The clank of equipment, the sound of men who have all the time in the world because they know they're winning. Willi checks his ammunition. 3 belts left for the MG42, maybe 200 rounds total. 2 potato masher grenades, their wooden handles worn smooth from nervous handling. His Kar 98K rifle with 15 rounds, a pistol he's never fired. Not enough. Never enough. But maybe enough to matter. The first American shape materializes at exactly 73 meters. The soldier moves cautiously, rifle raised, gesturing to others still hidden in the mist. Willi's finger finds the trigger. His hands have stopped shaking. The MG-42 roars to life with its distinctive sound, like ripping canvas, 1,200 rounds per minute, a sound the Americans have learned to fear. The lead soldier drops. The others scatter, diving for cover behind the remnants of a stone wall. Willi fires another burst, chips of stone exploding where the Americans have taken shelter. Then he's moving, scrambling through his escape route with the machine gun clutched to his chest. Through the bakery cellar, the darkness absolute, his feet finding the path by memory alone. Up through the hole in the floor of the adjacent house, emerging behind a pile of roof tiles. He sets up the MG-42 in his second position, sights already aligned, and waits. Counts to 30 like Kuhn taught him. Let them think. Let them wonder. When the Americans move again, advancing on the bakery position, Willi opens fire from his new angle. The crossfire effect is devastating even though he's the only shooter. 2 more Americans go down. The others retreat, faster now, dragging their wounded. Willi hears shouting, confusion, the sharp commands of officers trying to restore order. They think they're facing a squad, maybe more. The deception is working. But Willi knows the mathematics of this situation. Every bullet he fires is one fewer in his rapidly dwindling supply. Every minute that passes brings more American soldiers, more weapons, more inevitable weight of numbers. He's playing a game of chess where his opponent has infinite pieces and he has almost none. Yet he plays on, because what else is there? The alternative is surrender or flight, and both feel like betraying the men who died here. Both feel like admitting that their sacrifice meant nothing. The morning wears on. The Americans probe from different directions, testing his defenses, trying to identify his positions. Willi responds with calculated fire, never staying in one place, always moving, always creating the illusion of multiple defenders. He fires the MG-42 from one position, then sprints to another and fires his rifle, making them think there's a machine gun crew and riflemen. He throws a grenade from the church ruins, then fires from the opposite side of the square. The Crossroads becomes a maze of death where every pile of rubble might hide a German soldier. By noon, Willi has been alone for 30 hours. The isolation is beginning to do strange things to his mind. He catches himself talking to Sergeant Kuhn, asking for advice, and sometimes he almost hears the sergeant answer. He positions Friedrich's corpse behind a window and starts to believe the dead man is actually providing covering fire. The line between tactic and delusion blurs in the smoke and stress. The Americans bring up a machine gun of their own, a .30 caliber Browning that tears into the bakery walls with methodical precision. Willi hunkers in the cellar as bullets chew through the brickwork above, dust and fragments raining down. He's down to 1 belt for the MG-42 now. Maybe 80 rounds. The end is approaching with mathematical certainty. But the Americans don't know that. They don't know he's a single teenager with almost no ammunition, conducting a symphony of violence with instruments that have nearly fallen silent. When the machine gun fire stops, Willi doesn't wait for them to advance. He emerges from a different position entirely, the collapsed storehouse on the eastern edge of the Crossroads, and fires a long burst that sends the American gun crew scrambling. Then he's moving again, legs burning, lungs screaming, the weight of the machine gun and his exhaustion combining into a physical agony that's almost welcome. Pain means he's still alive. Pain means he's still fighting. The afternoon brings artillery. Not much, but enough. Shells scream overhead and detonate in the ruins, adding new craters to the moonscape of destruction. Willi curls into a basement corner as the world shakes apart above him, praying to a god he's not sure he believes in anymore. When the barrage ends, he emerges covered in dust, ears ringing, but miraculously untouched. The artillery has actually helped him. The fresh rubble provides new firing positions, new routes through the ruins. The Americans have inadvertently given him more tools to work with. By evening of the second day, Willi is down to his last 30 rounds for the MG42. His rifle ammunition is gone, he has one grenade left, his canteen ran dry 6 hours ago, and his tongue feels swollen in his mouth. He hasn't eaten since yesterday morning. His hands are cut and bleeding from scrambling through sharp debris. There's a ringing in his ears that won't stop. But he's still here, still fighting, still denying the Americans this meaningless intersection of two roads in a dying nation. The Americans make their final push at dusk. They come from 3 directions simultaneously, having finally committed enough force to overwhelm what they believe is a German strongpoint. Willi fires his last belt in short, desperate bursts, moving between positions one final time. When the MG42 falls silent, its barrel too hot to touch, he picks up his rifle and fires his last few rounds. Then the rifle too is empty, and he's left with just the grenade and his pistol. He can hear them now very close, American voices calling clear as they move through the ruins room by room. Willi clutches his last grenade, prepared to take a few more with him, when something inside him simply breaks. Not his courage, he's proven that beyond any doubt. But the machinery of war that had kept him fighting for 48 hours finally grinds to a halt. He's 17 years old, he's done enough. More than enough. Willi Herold raises his hands and steps out into the fading light. The Americans surround him with weapons raised, shouting commands he doesn't fully understand but obeys anyway. They're expecting more Germans. They search the ruins methodically, finding only corpses, Kuhn, the twins, others, positioned in ways that made them seem like active combatants. The Americans stare at the dead, then at Willi, then at each other. Understanding dawns slowly. One kid, one teenager had held them off for 2 days. Had killed or wounded a dozen men, had forced an entire platoon to waste precious time and resources on a single crossroads. One American sergeant approaches Willi, older than the others, with hard eyes that have seen too much. He looks at the boy's face, at the cuts and exhaustion, at the uniform hanging on his thin frame. He says something in English that Willi doesn't understand, but the tone is clear enough. It's not quite respect, but it's not contempt either. It's the acknowledgement of one soldier to another, regardless of age or circumstance. They give him water. Willi drinks until he vomits, then drinks more slowly. They bandage his hands. They let him sit while they process what happened here. And in his pocket, still unread, is his mother's letter. They'll read it later, in a POW camp somewhere, and learn that his younger sister has her first tooth, that the apple tree in the yard survived the winter, that his mother prays for him every night. But that's later. For now, Willi Herold sits in the ruins of a nameless crossroads, surrounded by enemies who are also somehow not enemies, and allows himself to feel what he hasn't let himself feel for 48 hours. Relief. He's alive. Against all logic and probability, he's alive. The war will go on without him. Germany will fall, history will march forward. But he bought his 2 days. He held his ground. And in the mathematics of survival in the final days of the Third Reich, that's as close to victory as anyone could hope for. The Americans lead him away as darkness falls. Behind him the crossroads sits silent, except for the wind moving through the ruins. 2 roads meeting in the rubble. A place that will never appear in history books, where a 17-year-old boy became something more than he ever wanted to be, then became a boy again when it was finally over. End.